everybody. Welcome to today's edition of Daily Distinction. Really glad you are here. We have been trying to do this for a while because Joseph Jaffe is my guest today, and I said all these things about him when we were getting ready to have him on the show. And then, Joseph, I'm just going to go ahead and bring you in here. And look at that behind. Look.
See, I fooled you. I had a brick wall in.
And you could see.
I told you.
You did.
Exactly.
Joseph and I were talking right before we went on, and he had a brick wall behind him. And I was joking about the bad storm that hit. At least didn't blow his brick wall down, his virtual brick wall.
It did.
Now look at that. Oh my gosh! I guess
the wall blew down, and your books were behind.
Yeah. Well, that is very cool. Hey, it's great to see you. Hope you're doing well. The first question has to be about the storm, because I got so many comments from folks. You know, I talked about you coming on, and so many folks were kind enough to ask, "Are you okay?" and all that. And I said, I know he's okay. I know that, health-wise, everything's all right. But tell the story of the storm, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, it was so funny because this storm, it came in and then it left in about 2 hours for the most part. I actually ended up doing my show at 5 p.m. from a parking lot near Starbucks, because everything was closed. Pretty much 97% of the town of Westport, had lost power. And, in 2 hours, the wind was howling and the rain was coming down, but you just cannot imagine how much destruction and devastation is possible in a 2-hour period. Now, Connecticut and Westport is not one of those towns that is subject to extreme weather, like some areas in the Midwest Sure. And I at one point I drove underneath a massive tree that had fallen and was leaning on the power lines. Oh my! And I drove underneath it, and I thought to myself, at any point in time, it could fall and crush me. And it was just destruction after destruction after destruction. And you know what, Scott, I mean, I've been listening to you almost on a daily basis since the pandemic hit. And, everything, like whether you talk about priorities or you talk about perspective, but everything is relative. Yeah. You think you got it bad, someone's got it worse. You think you're rich, someone's richer. You think you're poor, someone's poorer. We got power. We have a generator. We got power back. We lost it Tuesday at 1:22 p.m. We got it back at 8:30 p.m. on a Thursday. But there were people in my town that still waited another 10 days after we got power back to get their power. So everything is relative. And I think, the perspective that comes, I mean, lots of things swam in my mind, like Mother Nature. Just if we haven't been reminded enough, whether it's COVID, whether it's tropical storms, we are nothing but dust. We are nothing but ants, which doesn't mean we're insignificant. It just means we need to have perspective on a daily basis and realize how good we got it, how lucky we are, but also how vulnerable and fragile we are.
You bet. Well, I want to talk more about that. I want to share this with you real quickly, though. There we are. There's
you found it.
Guys. This is the night we met, isn't it?
I know. I'm looking at. I'm trying to see where I am relative on my weight loss or gain journey. I think I look pretty good. I think I should wear that shirt again.
You look really good. I'm telling you. Jay Bear on the far right, and gosh, we just go around. Tamsin Webster on the far left is Marcus Sheridan. And there you and I are, and
I think that's John Hall. If I got it,
yeah, sure is. So we had dinner in Las Vegas, but
what a group!
What a gang, huh?
It looks like it's the five of you, and I just happen to quickly photobomb your photo.
We see who's at the head of the table. We see the leader who was at the head of the table, who had to come around to take his picture with the peons.
That was John, right? No.
Yeah, right. At the rest. So anyway, just wanted to share that real quickly. Got some nice comments. Brian is joining us. He's always first in on the program, and love that. Ted, happy Tuesday to you. Glad you were here. Scott, thank you. And thank you for welcoming Joseph as well. Brian did as well. And Curtis, every day Curtis is someplace different. It's just crazy. He checks in with us today from Gallup, New Mexico. How about that? That's
Wow.
very cool. Joseph, there's so many things we could talk about. Let me start first with you. You have a terrific live stream. Would you talk about that for a minute? About how folks can catch you on your live stream and what you focus on with that, please?
Sure. Well, I'll try and tell my story as briefly as I can, but it's a personal one. Yeah. It's a true one. I was in South Africa visiting my mom, who, thank God she's doing well, but 4 years into cancer, and I've tried to go home every 3 to 4 times a year to South Africa. Sure. To see her. So I'm in South Africa, and I try and, dovetail a little bit of speaking, a little bit of work while I'm there. It's about 15 minutes before I'm meant to go on and present. And the phone rings. It's my wife to tell me that she has COVID. And you can just imagine. And I presented, I left the next day, came back. The day that I arrived, my wife was actually tested, and she tested positive. And I arrived home, and I immediately self-quarantined, moved to a different bedroom, different floor in the house, where I lived for about 3.5 weeks. And I don't know what it was, Scott, but just the next day, I hadn't even been very active on Facebook for months up to that, but I decided just to go and do a Facebook Live. Mm-hmm. And then the next day I did another Facebook Live. And then the next day, another one. And then the next day I went for a test. And I streamed my test. I mean, not obviously, showing details and privacy, but kind of, and then I discovered Zoom, and then I played around with Zoom, and then I discovered the same software that you use, StreamYard. Yeah. And then I came up with a name for it, Corona TV, which speaks to my irreverence and my own personality, which is, poke the bear a little bit. And then it just continues, the serendipity of it all. My sister has a spinning studio in London, and she basically was faced with the reality that if she closed her doors, she would close them forever. Yeah. But she knew she had to stop in-person classes. So she put all the bikes on a U-Haul, emailed her customers, said, who wants a bike? Everybody raised their hands. And she pivoted. She started using Vimeo and Instagram Live. I said to her, you should come on my show and be my guest. And she was my first guest. Well, I'm approaching 100 guests now. And Corona TV has become every day, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Scott, if I tell you this, and I don't know if I told you this even when I had you on my show, which was one of my best interviews, it was just so amazing having you on. This has saved my life. This has saved me. This has given me purpose. This is what I was meant to do. This has given me joy. And it's so funny that it took a global pandemic for me to actually discover who I really was and what I really wanted to do. I love public speaking. I love writing. I love doing the same thing you do. But if I never had another client in my life and never had to do another piece of consulting, that day could not come soon enough. And so what happened is the show is now the show is about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing, which was my life before the pandemic hit. Yeah. And the rest is history.
And how and you've been so kind to ask about mine. And how is your wife? And did you test positive? How have you done through this?
I didn't test positive. It's funny. No antibodies. I was living in a house, nor did my kids actually. But to me, look, I'm no doctor, and I don't have a product called My Pillow, which apparently is quite interesting at the moment. But I will say, hygiene, washing hands, social distance, it works, and I'm. Look, I have no idea whether that's the reason why I didn't catch it. Maybe my wife wasn't shedding anymore, but I never caught it, nor did my kids. And she's, thank God, doing very, very well. Her symptoms were flu-like, so chills, aches, a fever, but no respiratory, thank goodness.
Oh, that's good. That's great. It's so crazy, because I shared with you, I tested positive and I had nothing. I mean, a headache a couple of mornings, and that might have been bourbon related.
I'll take that
as opposed to COVID related. My pal Larry Wingate, I've got to pull it up here. He sent me a text a little bit earlier today that I thought was pretty cool. He said, pour a measure of whiskey into a glass and see if you can smell it. If you can, then drink it. If you taste it, then it's reasonable to assume you're currently free of the virus. I tested myself 9 times last night.
Yeah.
It was virus free each time. I'll test myself again today because I have a headache, which might be a symptom. So.
9 times too few, in my opinion. It should be done every 10 minutes or so.
There you go. Joseph, and by the way, I just want to make sure everybody knows Joseph's show is absolutely fascinating. There have been so many episodes that I love, but I've shared with you one of the ones of your program that I just absolutely was just mesmerized by was your interview with the creator and showrunner of Defending Jacob. And gosh, what an insightful, he talked about something I never even considered. And I did movie reviews on television for 10 years, but the fact that he had to come at the source material understanding he had a different audience. And the masterful way that you work that into a better understanding of marketing means you understand a different audience. I just thought was just brilliant on your part. And you just conducted a brilliant interview. So if you want to go back and look at some of the previous episodes of Corona TV, that's just they're all terrific. But that was a special one for me.
It was actually interesting because he was probably at the time the most is the word famous person that had been on my show. And I decided, because he was so famous, that I would wear a suit. Now, part of the approach, calling it Corona TV, the reason why I'm wearing a T-shirt right now, the reason why I don't have gel in my hair, is because I wanted something that could, when you look back in time, like almost freezing time, I wanted it to be like authentic, as in I'm at home right now, and this is the reality. But I put on a suit, and I thought I actually looked quite good. I must admit, like it was blue shirt, blue. It was all blue, and there he is in a T-shirt, looking like he rolled out of bed. Basically woke up and just like, I'm feeling a little bit intimidated right now by you, Joe. So I said, you know what? And I just spontaneously ripped my tie off, opened up my buttons, and threw the tie across the room, which in a way disarmed him. And it was just a special moment in that show that was special to me. But part of the style is learning how to be an interviewer. And the most important thing I can tell people who want to do this is don't overthink it. Just be yourself and let it flow. And I had a whole list of questions for him, and I got to ask them, and I was quite well prepared. Now I pretty much don't have any notes anymore. Now it's just a conversation. And my feeling is every single person on this planet, if you can't sit down with them for 50 minutes and have a real conversation, two human beings just connecting, then something's wrong with the world and something's wrong with you. And that's my style, which is I'll send an email to my guests, say, hey, what's on your mind? What do you want to talk about? What are 3 things that are interesting for you? That's it. And that is the basis of just 50 minutes every day.
You brought up, this made me think of something I put in one of my books because I admire great interviewers. And there was a piece that I read and this was, when I wrote this, it was the time that Larry King was the most celebrated interviewer in broadcasting. And they said there was an examination of why were his questions so good, and he did the least amount of preparation. Not that he said he was unprepared. He said, my preparation is 20 years of doing this, but my preparation is I want to ask the questions that the audience would ask. Sometimes interviewers get so prepared that they're asking questions at a higher level than than what the audience really wants to hear. And there was a great thing. They said, well, give us an example. And he said, well, if somebody was interviewing John Adams, the second president of the United States, the typical news interview would say, let's review the War of 1812 and why did this particular aspect happen? And he said, my interview would start, George Washington, nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to know that. I would love to know that. Just one of the things I like about you too.
What would TMZ say about him?
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Yeah,
but I love what you're saying. I just want to don't lose that thought. But
sure.
But so what I've done as well. I mean, even if you think about it, right, with books, like the obvious question, why did you write the book? That's such a lazy question to ask. It's and so certain things have happened with me. Like, for example, I'll go to Amazon to like take a screenshot of the book, and I'll see for some reason, occasionally, I don't know if you've seen this, it says like January 1, 1455 or something. Sometimes the date is completely wrong. And so I'll start off with that. I'll be like, I had no idea you were a vampire. That's unbelievable. Like, tell me this. And so suddenly it's just wacky and off the wall. But you pick up. I had Jeff Cottrell, who ran marketing for Converse. He was the general manager. He ran marketing for Coca-Cola, and he ran marketing for Starbucks. And he's on my show on Friday. But I noticed that his Twitter handle is Yog Money. So YOG Money, Yog Money. And I said, what, actually the commenters there, I said, what's with that? He was doing a commercial with a music producer and a famous rapper, I forget who. And that person kept on calling him G, but he would say, yo, G, so he would he became Yo G Money because he was money. And I said to him, you could have gone to Twitter with the amount of money you were probably spending on, with them, and just demanded your name, Jeff Cottrell, or something like that. But you just kept it because there was a story behind it. There was something that was endearing about it. And so just by sometimes picking up on those silly little things, you actually end up going in a completely different direction. And that's been what I've loved about it.
Yeah, you are so great at that, and it's and you're so right too. That's part of what makes what you do so distinctive is that so many go for the easy, pat question. Why did you write this book? Well, the publisher gave me money and I had to finish it.
Yeah.
As AJ says here, because I could. Absolutely. But one of the things in your approach is the irreverence. We've seen the book Built to Last. You had a little different take on that title. Where did the title come from, and why was that an important thing for you to write? I mean, and to me, that kind of gets back to my version has always been the better question is, of all the things you could write, why did you pick this? As opposed to why did you write this book? Joseph, you could have written many different topics and many different titles. Why was this what you selected?
So this book, which is my fifth, Built to Suck, the inevitable demise of the corporation and how to save it, with a question mark, because, spoiler alert, I don't know that corporations can be saved. I think we are witnessing the end of the corporate empire or the corporate civilization. I think we're at a moment in time, and we've seen it happen. Since I wrote it, I wouldn't normally, and I'll get back to a question, but the only reason I actually have my books here is because I actually use them sometimes to prop up my laptop when I'm doing my show. If you could see, I mean, I
don't want to turn this camera around.
No, I've done this. I've done this before. You can see it. These are two Nike boxes right now. This is probably going to backfire on me now because I've done this, and then the whole green screen thing fails. But on the cover of this book is this. You can see the green screen is going crazy. Is my little corporate graveyard, and if you look really carefully, you can see Sears and J.C. Penney. And when I wrote the book, both of them were still in business. So there are two ways. Jim Collins wrote, incredible guy, incredible author, incredible book, Built to Last. And this isn't a knock on that at all. He says very, very clearly that visionary companies will not be visionary companies forever. And if they don't subscribe to certain of the tenets, then they will cease to be visionary companies. And we've seen so many of them on his list, even like the Motorola's of the world, the GEs of the world, etc. But Jay Scheidt, who I used to work for his agency, his advertising agency, he said, let's see how big we get before we suck, before we go bad. And that was the basis that companies today are not built to last. They're built to suck. And even though I say, going back to the reverend part, the key to success is to suck less. The fact is, I genuinely believe that the business model of big business is broken, that the very thing that helped them grow, and if you think about the Industrial Revolution, you think about mass merchandising, mass marketing, mass media, size, scale, economies of scale, efficiencies of scale, cost cutting, global networks and partnerships. It was a business model that was built on volume. Mm-hmm. That old joke, which is, we're running everything we sell, we sell it at 10% loss, and so how do you make money? Don't worry, we'll make it up on volume. Yeah. But what's happened now is living through the entrepreneurial revolution, living through the disintermediation and the disruption of technology, of startups, all the seismic, cosmic change like COVID. These companies have become too big, too siloed, too political, too dysfunctional, too conservative. They're slowing down when the world is speeding up. And case in point, Scott, look at you and me. Look at the two of us. We've created streaming brands and platforms, and mm-hmm. our quality and our production value is increasing on a daily basis.
Certainly is.
But the Jimmy Fallons of the world and the and the Stephen Colberts, they're descending, in a way. They're mm-hmm. descending in the sense that they're canned, overly produced, audience applause signs going off all the time. That's not authentic anymore.
Right.
This is authentic. We are authentic. And so it's another embodiment that the establishment, the status quo, to be an incumbent is, there's that old saying, it's tough at the top, but it's even worse at the bottom. But it is tough at the top right now. And that's why I wrote this book. I was frustrated, and I was kind of a little bit angry too, which is witnessing the fact that these companies were not figuring it out, and there was something waiting. I couldn't identify it by name, but it turns out that it was COVID-19.
My wife and I met up with a couple of young men last night, friends of my stepson, high school friend of my stepson, and a colleague of his. He had taken a job in Seattle, big name company, and so I asked the two of them, one working with one company and one another, both based in Seattle, both behemoth type companies. What has surprised you in your work experience? You're now 26, 27 years old, and both of them agreed that it's one thing in college to hear about corporate politics. It is quite another thing to experience it and be caught in it. And both of them were incredibly disillusioned with what the big corporate experience was like. And, you say it, I say it, if you can't create a great employee experience, how do you expect those folks to go out and create a customer experience? And it was really interesting that neither one of them said that they thought they had an entrepreneurial bone in their body until they realized what it was like to work for a big corporation. And I think, to your point, we're seeing that more and more and more. And these are exactly the type of young professionals that any organization would love to have with them. And it's exactly the type that the big corporation now, at least seems to, that's a pretty small sample size, but seems to be alienating.
There's no doubt. And look, I want to also just be very clear, which is, it's I often say this, which is, and I'm sure you would agree, which is, it's kind of easy to be us standing on stage, wagging our fingers, saying you all suck, and talking about all the things that companies are doing wrong. It's much harder to be in the trenches.
Sure
it's
is.
much harder to actually have to execute against the idea. But with that said, it's also important, I think, to recognize that problems are one thing. Coming up with solutions is really the bigger challenge. Now, this book isn't just about the death of the corporation, because some will survive, some will thrive. In order to do that, I come up with a whole map. I came up with a survival planning canvas. I came up with this, what I think is maybe the most interesting, I wouldn't even call it philosophy, but kind of vision, which is this idea of heresy. Embrace your heresy. Are you prepared to fire yourself? What if you fired your customer? What if you slaughtered the cash cow? What if you left money on the table? What if you did a hard reset? And for all of these examples, I have real examples to say, guess what? Every single one of these heresies have already come true. Like the example of, leaving money on the table or slaughtering the cash cow. Well, Netflix, when they shipped their billionth DVD, they shut it down and they moved completely over into streaming. Or REI closing on Black Friday, leaving money on the table, right? The most successful shopping day on the calendar. It shows you fortune favors the brave, by the way, because again, don't shoot the messenger. Walmart has announced no more Black Friday. So, there may be no more Black Fridays left on the calendar because of COVID. REI got out in front of it. They had no idea why it would make sense. They just knew that it did. And, in the book, I come up with what I call the 4 growth pillars. And that is the prime directive, growing, right? Because if you, and I specify, it's not just growing out, it's growing up. Yeah. It's making tough choices. It's sacrificing. It's opportunity cost. So I'll tell you the 4 pillars are very briefly. It's digital disruption, customer obsession, talent resurrection, and corporate citizenship. And what you were talking about with employees, and I air quote that because I called it talent resurrection, and it is just as clear as the light of day that if you can't win the raging war for talent, you are dead. And the first thing to do, and I said this in the chapter, is let's ban the employee. Ban the word. Don't ever refer to your talent again as employees, like Disney refers to its customers and employees, right? As cast members and guests. If we can't harness the inner entrepreneur, the intrapreneur within the company, we're dead, because no one is going to wait around for 40 years or 50 years to have that beautiful retirement party. And I even say this, I said, no one wants that gold Rolex, maybe a gold Apple Watch, but not a gold Rolex. So move on. So there will be companies that survive and even thrive. But there are going to be the exceptions, not the norm.
Wasn't that interesting recently when Jeff Bezos said, there will be a day that Amazon goes bankrupt in his job, and how much criticism he got for that? And I just thought that was a brilliant statement. It really dovetails with what you're talking about, is that he gets the reality that someday, somebody's going to make us obsolete, in a sense, like Walmart made Sears obsolete and Amazon has certainly challenged Walmart. I mean, it's how relevant can you stay through this incredible changing process?
I'll tell you, when I saw that quote, I did, literal and figurative backflips, and I put it on the back flap of the book, from flip to flap, and because it validated the entire book. Because if he could say that about Amazon, there isn't a CEO and there isn't a company on this planet that they wouldn't apply to. And case in point, look at ABC, CBS, and NBC, right? And then look at the next big 3 that came after them: AOL, Yahoo, and MSN. Some people might be, who? What? Do they still exist, right? And then there was MySpace. And then look at the woes associated with Twitter. And eventually we lead up to Facebook, and we think there's no way on this earth that Facebook, with its, I don't know, 3 billion or whatever the number is, could ever have any doubt or any chinks in the armor. Well, they're living through a boycott at the moment, an advertiser boycott. And as you know, money talks, and you know what walks. So no, the inspiration behind the thesis of the book, as opposed to the name. I walked into my daughter's classroom about 4 or 5 years ago, and I saw, it was a history classroom, and I saw a map of 5,000 years of civilization, color-coded by geography. Yeah. And I looked at it: Byzantines, Romans, Ottomans, Ming Dynasty, Egyptians, Nazi Germany. And that's when it hit me, which is, if the corporation were a civilization, then it too would go the way. And I will say one thing, which is, I didn't even notice it at the time, but when you look at the extreme right-hand side, you see UK, well, that was before Brexit. You see, obviously as of late, USSR, which became Russia. You see China, what may come out of China after COVID-19. And then at the very bottom, you see USA. And I say in the book, very, very briefly and almost, intentionally, I said, America, for America, the greatest country in the history of this world and on the face of this earth, which, I say almost like every time we say that, we are just setting ourselves up to fall because of the hubris and the arrogance. When we look at the numbers of COVID right now, we see the strife happening, and if there's anything that is true, and I mean quite literally with respect to the countries, and figuratively with respect to the companies, the only way to survive and thrive and stay alive is to constantly hone what I call our survival instinct. Survival instinct is based on two things: self-preservation, don't kill me, right? And adaptation, I'm going to kill you. And if we don't stay alert, and if we don't stay on our toes, there is only one inevitability, and that is death.
My pal Randy Pennington, we're going a couple minutes over, I hope you don't mind, but my pal Randy Pennington has this great story that he tells about his grandfather, who was a minister in Texas. And they offered him a salary at his church, and he refused it. He said, I'll just take the offering. And they couldn't understand it. And as Randy relates, his grandfather explained to him, a hungry dog hunts a lot better. And he wanted to be held to the standard of delivering value, and his compensation be based on that. And the reason that what you said reminds me of that is I think we have gotten extraordinarily complacent in this country. We say greatest country in the world because we've said it for so long, and I think it has unconsciously, maybe subconsciously, eroded the behavior that made the country what it was. And I don't mean that. It's not a Democratic or Republican statement.
No, it's a true statement, because in my first job, I remember one of our almost mantras was never forget where you've come from. It is the humility of remembering those humble beginnings and that entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, I wrote a piece. I became a citizen in 2008, and I am a proud American and a patriotic American, and I want to fight for us to stay leaders to the world, a light to the rest of these nations. But in order to do that, we have to work hard to maintain that edge, that leadership edge. And it begins by I wrote a piece saying, what if our founding fathers were the founder fathers? Because that's what they were. They were entrepreneurs. They were scrappy, founders of a startup, this experiment that we call, this wonderful experiment called democracy. It's still an MVP. It's still a work in progress, as is evidenced by by recent times, and that's why we all have to work together. I have to say, I know we're going a bit over, but but I just happened to see Bruce's comment, and he said, when I hold my head in a certain way, it looks like I'm wearing Taxi Terry's cap. And I was told to ask you about Taxi Terry, and I never did. But I refused to like find out about it myself, but I had to ask you about it personally.
Sure.
Tell me about Taxi Terry. And wait, am I?
The books about him, but Taxi Terry is a real life taxi driver in Jacksonville, Florida. I've told the story for years, but part of what I love about Terry is that he found a way to create distinction, even in the face of this incredible competition and change in the taxi industry. Not only to separate himself from other cab drivers in Jacksonville, but now how do you fight the onslaught of Uber and Lyft and so forth? And part of his excellence is in how he sets and delivers the expectations for his customers. I mean, the joke is, but it's, when I'm standing at the airport and he picked me up, he jumps out and points at me and says, "Are you ready for the best cab ride of your life?" And they delivered it. But the best part of it was he was smart enough, wise enough, perceptive enough to realize that people didn't want to ride from point A to point B. They wanted a transportation solution. If all he was doing was selling a ride, then Uber is his competition. But he could go to companies and say, "I can be your transportation solution," and create something for them that transcended mere transaction. And that's to me the big lesson of Taxi Terry is that anybody, if I can get an ultimate customer experience from my cab driver, why shouldn't I get it from my financial advisor? Why shouldn't I get it from every place that I do business? And that to me is the extraordinary thing about Taxi Terry. And
it's a beautiful story. I want to return the favor and talk about an experience I had. I was at the Independence Beer Hall in Philadelphia, close to the Liberty Bell, and I'd had one too many beers. So unfortunately, the seal had been broken, and I went to the restroom, which was in kind of like an RV type of setup. Yeah. And there was a bathroom attendant, and there was the cologne and the mints, and he handed me a napkin and all the usual things that you would expect. But then I saw a sign kind of covered in plastic, very badly laminated on the wall, and it said, "Venmo me." He was on Venmo, and it just got my attention, and it blew me away. And I thought to myself, this man knows more about innovation and experimentation and new technology than most of the marketers and clients that I consult with or that I speak to. And I immediately took a photo of it, and I went and I put it into the book, and I said, "Let's make him a millionaire. Please, if you read this book, send him $1. Don't say who it's from. Don't mention my name. Just say because." That's distinction. It's being different, not for the sake of being different, but with some kind of cause and some kind of grounding.
Absolutely. Joseph, my mind expands. You are vitamins for the brain, my friend. You create incredible thought. That's thank you for your time. Thank you. I'm so sorry for the storm that we didn't get a chance to do this at the original.
It worked out.
Goodness, we got a chance to do it, and I hope you come back. I hope we can do this again because
listen, you can come back anytime. You just have to say the word. And by the way, someone that I feel is truly distinctive is you. And I know I've complimented you before. I'm going to do it again, just embarrass you a little bit on your own show. There are little things, for example, like having Jaffe juice in your background, which is why I'm kind of getting revenge on you. But there was something, I've said this to my interns as well, which is when everyone is the same and does the same and thinks the same, you just when someone is different or when there's true distinction, it just hits you over the head like a like a sledgehammer. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be the smallest little thing. The thing that struck me with you is every single email communication we've had, the genuine, affection and enthusiasm is unmatched by anyone. And almost in every email, you would always sign off by going, "I'm so excited to sit down with you. I'm so looking forward to this time." And, but it's like it made me feel like $1,000,000. And trust me when I say not many people do that. Maybe nobody genuinely takes the to offer up a heartfelt compliment, and that humanity just it came through. And so I want to thank you for that.
You were very kind to say that, and as you were saying that, the phrase in my head was "birds of a feather." I'm glad that we are flocking together on this. Like attracts like, and everything I could mirror those comments right back to you in multiples. So Charles asked the question that I was getting ready to ask. So how do people find you, follow you, and all of the above? Joseph, would please clue them in.
Sure. Well, I'm generally Jaffe Juice on all the socials, so Twitter, Instagram, etc., etc. My show is Corona TV. You can find that at either coronatv.show or jaffejuice.tv, and that's every day 2 p.m. live on Facebook, Periscope, Twitter, LinkedIn, and I started doing it on Twitch. I have one viewer who's always trying to tell me that they can buy me thousands of followers. So we have a very special relationship. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else to. I think that would be good enough,
right?
Oh yeah, and before the pandemic, like when you watch The Walking Dead, all these nemesis, whether it's Negan or whatever, it's like, what were you before the pandemic? I operated a school bus, or I was a teacher. Before the pandemic, I used to write books and do public speaking for a living. And you can find out about that and my speaking at josephjaffe.com.
I encourage everybody to check out all of those, and particularly, I mean, I'm biased, but particularly your live stream show is just the range of guests that you have, and your brilliance as an interviewer shines through. So
no, thank you. I'm having fun. To tell Bruce, it's 2 p.m. Eastern, but today I'm doing at 5 p.m. If you really, really want to watch in an hour 15, I'm doing what I call Corona cocktails. So occasionally I like to get drunk with my, you need to come back. You need to come back, and that person you cited.
Yeah, a real brief cocktail after the one that I was on, but then I had to scoot, remember to do this, and so I didn't get to stay very long. But
how about we have you and your friend on, and then every 10 minutes we do another COVID test with bourbon.
He's talking about Larry Winget, by the way, who can drink me under the table, and has.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, Joseph, a million thanks. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for spending a little extra time with me, and I look forward to having you back. And thank you, my friend. It has been a very special program. Our big thanks to Joseph Jaffe for being here today. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. I look forward to talking to everybody tomorrow. Hey, quick reminders before we get out of here, and that is that post-pandemic events, the registration closes on Friday. If you want to be a part of that, you've got to sign up by Friday, and you can take $50 off the registration at adding the coupon code that we only talk about here, and it's Distinct 50. So please make sure that you do that, and I look forward to catching up with you at the same time again tomorrow on our next edition of Daily Distinction.